Hey everyone, this is your Mini of the East, and I feel like doing a bit of a late night rambling here. Something to get out there. I don't know if I'll probably post this or I'll have this unlisted, but something I wanted to do for fun and just think to myself. Because I thought for a bit when Smash is starting to come out again, and with all the hype that I also got with the Wii U version almost 5 years ago when it was first unveiled. Jeez, that didn't feel so long ago, but I digress. The Smash Ultimate bringing about every single character back from the previous games is unprecedented, and a roster of this size is practically unimaginable. And most fighter games nowadays have a roster size that Smash is like almost quadrupling. But it also got me thinking on the past games that we got leading up to this point. And Smash is about to turn 20 next year, since it started coming out in 1999. So, it got me thinking on the past games from the N64, GameCube, Wii U, and 3DS. More specifically, the topic of this video got me thinking about the 3DS, since that is the first and only Smash game to come out on a handheld system. And when it was being advertised, it was focusing more on concepts, game, items, games, and stages based on the handheld games that Nintendo published at the time, which is a pretty neat idea. And when they were advertising both the Wii U and 3DS, Wii U focused more on the console versions of the games that they were representing, and the 3DS was focusing on more on the handheld versions of the games for that series. But that was really clever. But that also got me thinking, like, what would have happened if Smash went a little earlier, like something like on DS or Game Boy Advance? And considering the Game Boy Advance's success over the years that it was out, I'd say it was a very more accessible handheld for many kids to grab their hands on. Same thing with the Game Boy. But I think with the advanced technology at the time, coming to the early 2000s before the DS time, I felt that it was pretty innovative to do something like that. But not okay. I'm just rambling. Like rambling. Yeah. That got me thinking, since last year I was having another late night thoughts like these, and got to think to myself, with these exact same thoughts, what would have happened if I made a roster for a Smash game on the Game Boy Advance? And I had many thoughts afterwards, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make a Smash game on a Game Boy Advance? And then it turns to a Smash ROM hack, which would later become Rivals of Ether, or would be the basis for Rivals of Ether, since the creator of that game made that Smash ROM hack that looks like if Smash was on a Game Boy, which is a pretty clever idea. But the one thing I wanted to get in my head if I made a roster for the Game Boy Advance was mostly focusing on characters that were only Game Boy Advance, or mostly Game Boy Advance, which is a very hard thing to do, since there weren't that many series out there that could be represented well to be used in Smash. But I think I've thought through this roster like over an hour, while also trying to figure out the movesets for each character. Keep in mind this, I'm just trying to remember these as much as I can, and I also have I made this on my phone last year. It even has the date on here if I can just get it right. As you can see, I hope it's not too blurry, but if you can't make the date out, it's supposed to be June 9th of 2017. And I still have the full roster right here. And I might have tweaked it a bit at the time, but I haven't touched it since then. So I'm just going to run down all the characters, and I'll give my thoughts again. Considering with Smash Ultimate's criteria and how Sakurai thinks about how bringing these characters in, my thoughts have changed since I made this roster. But other than that, I'm going to go through all the characters, starting with the original 12 from Smash 64. I felt much like the other games, it's nice to still bring in the original roster from where it all started, as it makes sense. And they're mostly still iconic to this day. Maybe Fox is pushing it since he's never been on the handheld since, but mostly DS. Oh, I should put up the criteria of what characters and games for like the cutoff for this. Considering that the DS I think came out in 2004, 2005, I can't remember top of my head. My cutoff year for the Game Boy Advance was 2006, and that's when most major titles for the handhelds pretty much stopped for the system or was stopped being supported. So any game that came out past 2006 or something like that, I wasn't going to consider for being put into the game. But yeah, back on that track, the original 12, most of them would still be the same except for two characters, which would be Link and Samus, for the reasons that they're games that they're being based on. This Link would be based on his appearance in Minish Cap, since that was the more later game that came out for the handheld. Because at the time, the only other games that came up for the GBA would be Four Swords Adventures and the GBA port of A Link to the Past, which they were also pushing for the Toon Link look during that time when Wind Waker was relevant. And that's, I think, would help. Also, with the small size, it would also help Link stand out a bit. His moveset would mostly relatively stay the same, save for the fact that he would have that weird bird wizard thing on his head, which could be interacting. Again, this has been a while since I've played Minish Cap and made this list, but I think there was a way they could have implemented like the sizing mechanics or some more of the unique weapons, like the cape could be his new up B, and that wind jar could be one of his aerials. Not only would it be able to push the opponent and deal damage a bit, but also propel him forward or backwards depending where he's directing the jar attack. And then if we go to Samus would mostly stay the same, but her design would mostly be reminiscent of Metroid Fusion, which was the GBA game that came out at the time. I would have gone with Zero Mission, but Brawl did that with Zero Suit Samus, so I wasn't going to include that. But Samus will more or less play the same. It's just her design will be slightly different. Alright, next would be Peach, then Bowser. They would also relatively stay the same. And then next would be Fawful. Fawful from the Mario and Luigi series. The trilogy itself is popular, and the RPG that came on the GBA was immensely successful, and he's the most iconic character from that trilogy of games. When the next two games went on to the DS, and has become a secondary antagonist. Secondary antagonist for the first two games, primary antagonist for the third game. But yeah, Fawful has a wide array of abilities. He's got the humor, and most Smash games. But the past Smash games, we needed more villains. Thankfully, Ultimate's doing that. So I think one of Fawful's main gimmicks would be him utilizing some of his attacks from that little hover jetpack thing he uses, and maybe utilize some of his attacks from his boss fights. Can't really remember it on the top of my head. Again, this is all a long time ago. Next one will be Vaati, also from Minish Cap. Vaati was a character I wanted to have as a Zelda villain. I think back when in the original Wii U's marketing run, I wanted to have in the game. Also, I wanted to have him appear in Hyrule Warriors. Since Vaati was a villain in at least 3 of the games that technically made up the Four Swords trilogy. Minish Cap, Four Swords, and Four Swords Adventures. But in the first two games, he was that demon wind mage. But in the third, in Minish Cap, we saw him as a Minish with the corrupted cap he was using. He could utilize many of his attacks during the boss fights again, and when he was in that demon form. I should have brought up that this is since this is I'm basically making a game that came out before Brawl, so this is not going to include stuff like Final Smashes and stuff like that, or assist trophies. I'm considering this game to be basically an in between of Melee and Brawl. Like, what if this game was being made before Brawl was even announced? And Brawl was announced sometime in 2006, so I was going to say something like that. Next up would be Mewtwo, of course. It would be another popular character that would have been considered. And since he was one of the most popular legendaries, even by the time when Gen 3 was relevant at the time, he was one of the most sought after legendaries to capture in the series. Then would be Plutzo and Minun. I'll be honest. Looking back, I don't think Plutzo and Minun would be that useful, but I was only doing Plutzo and Minun for the fact that it was a gimmick that people would have tried to use, especially since they were theorized to be one of the Forbidden Seven in Brawl's files, like some sort of ice climbers type of gimmick. But the way that they're utilized in the Pokemon series with their positive and negative attractions, like they're based on the magnetic forces, it could have worked like how you control one of them, maybe like Plusle. You could throw mine in, like do a magnetic push for some of their smash attacks, or bring them close to be like some sort of their initial B attack, like to repel and attract your partner, and then utilize some of the other electric attacks that the Pokemon themselves can use, or use helping hands, like to briefly power themselves up or heal themselves. Next up would be Sceptile. Sceptile here is a very popular choice that people wanted to have in Smash for a while, since he was one of the most requested starter Pokemon to be put in a game, not only for his potential, but also his Mega Evolution that came out at the time when Wii U for Smash was being advertised, and that's when Mega Evolution was being brought in. And Sceptile, especially Mega Sceptile, but again, not counting stuff past 2006, but Sceptile himself would have been pretty useful, especially his popularity in the anime at the time. And he'd be like a very fast heavyweight, if that even tries to make sense. Like his moves himself would be really fast, but his I don't know, maybe something more like along the lines of Cloud, something you would imagine to be slow given the size, but be a pretty quick and heavy hitter, something like that. Like using his Leaf Blade, Leaf Storm was Gen 5. Yeah, but there's a bunch of grass type moves he could use. Okay, Marth, I included Marth because of Fire Emblem, and Fire Emblem was already very popular when it was in Japan, but considering that by the time Melee came out, Fire Emblem was just coming into the US when we got Binding Blade and then Sacred Stones. Martha would be brought in because he's the rep for Fire Emblem, the series as a whole. But the two characters I wanted to bring in that were from Fire Emblem would be Ephraim and Hector. Ephraim from Sacred Stones, one for being a spear user and one primary protagonist, and then Hector from the Binding Blades prequel, the Blazing Sword. For these reasons, I know people tend to hate on Fire Emblem a bunch because they mostly use swords and they're relatively the same, which is why I wanted to try and switch it up, especially since these two characters are also from the first were mentioned in the Game Boy Advance games. Although Hector's game did not actually, Hector was in Binding Blade. My mistake. I was thinking of Roy's game, which was the sequel. Binding Blade is the prequel. Yeah, and Hector uses the axe and he's more the heavy fighter, which I can see him being used as if it was a part of the roster. something more like along the lines of Ike, but instead of a sword, it'd be an axe, and it'd be more of like a heavy hitting and very slow, much slower than Ike. Ephraim would have the advantage of range and speed with the spear, and while he could do the some sort of like a variation of the dancing blade or like Marth's shield breaker initial B attack, I think he can use a lance to like boost himself up with an up B. I think with those two, they can switch things up with the Fire Emblem cast a bit. All right, next would be Isaac from Golden Sun. Isaac's been another popular character to bring in since, again, ever since Brawl introduced him as an assist trophy, and they've been wanting to see him since Wii U and 3DS. And while we didn't get him, I don't think his assist trophy was even in Wii U and 3DS. With at the time right now, of course, Smash Ultimate hasn't been released yet, and Isaac hasn't been shown off as a assist trophy if he's returning or not. I still feel that Isaac has the potential, especially since Golden Sun became a cult classic on the Game Boy Advance and its relative sequels. The second one on the Game Boy Advance, and then the third game on the DS, which never got a continuation, sadly. But yeah, with Isaac's use of the spells he's given, especially like that move ability, which could be used as a probably good grab, I think there's potential for Isaac there. But the best way I could describe how his moveset would be used, if I could point you to Super Smash Flash 2, where he's a playable character, and that's the best description I can give about him. Next would be Wario. Well, Wario's, of course, had his Wario Land series. And then there's the WarioWare games. There's enough potential there. He probably played the same as he did in Brawl, or he will be in Brawl again in 2006. Next would be Soma. Soma from Castlevania. Basically, spoilers, he's the reincarnation of Dracula without his memories. He'd be playing like Alucard in the sense that he'll be using the abilities that he gains from the opponents he defeats. Like he defeats a skeleton, he can get a bone throw or a sword. It's something like that. I think they would give him like the abilities that were the most useful, most powerful, or something of the in between for his initial B attacks. There's a lot of potential there for Soma. There's just so much to work with here. Next would be Django from Boktai. That weird GBA game from Hideo Kojima where you use the solar panels on the cartridge itself to power up the game, and well, that's how you use the main gimmick of the game, the light gun, to get through the game. It's kind of odd considering that game is such a rarity that and gimmicky to use solar panels to power up the game, and you have to walk outside. I think that enough is pretty unique to make him a part of the roster. Unfortunately, I don't know why I bothered to put him on the list if I don't know why. Because I never played the game. That's my own fault. I did that. But it's something of our own uniqueness that could be probably used. But looking back now, considering how very low key this series is and how unsuccessful it was in the States, I don't even know if it got successful in Japan. And I probably just cut him out of the roster. Next would be Klonoa from the Klonoa series. This is another character I just wanted to do on the fly because he only had one GBA game. And I think that I would just cut out Klonoa altogether as well because he's not even that popular anymore. He'd be a Namco representative, but if you wanted to do a proper Namco representative, you could just do Pac-Man since he's got plenty of ports, games, and whatever on the GBA. Klonoa I put on here because I was having the Klonoa craze at the time because I still love the character, I still love his games, but looking back now, I don't think there'd be much to talk about him. He'd be a very niche character if I were to even include him again. But if I did, he would still probably use the Wind Bolt ability to like grab his opponents. Actually, there's not much to his moveset other than that ring unless you gave him the sword, but I don't even know much about that. He'd be probably relegated as an assist trophy if we went further into the future. And the final character I put on here, just from my own biased opinion, would be Marsh from Final Fantasy Tactics. The Tactics games themselves are a hell of a lot of fun, so it's kind of weird that we had a somewhat Tactics sequel, or Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. It took place in the same world and used the same mechanics. And seeing how Ramza fights from the Final Fantasy series in Dissidia and Dissidia Omnis, there's a big potential to base off the job system that they use. But Marsh, I don't remember much about him. It's been way too long since I played the games, and trying to find something related with Marsh to use as a move set is very, very hard. Yeah, I think it'd be mostly original, even if we were to make it based off the primary class, which I think would be not the freelancer. It would, oh God, I can't even remember the name of the class, the beginning class you would do in Tactics, but that would be it. And one of the main abilities that Marsh learned earlier than most other characters would be a combo attack, which would be you get onto an opponent and you can combo with your other party members to deal more damage. I could see that mostly as a side beat, but that would be more of a copy of Marth's Dancing Blade. But other than that, that's pretty much the entire roster I made from which I would be basically called Super Smash Bros. Advanced. Not original name, but it was just something I thought was fun at the time. And most of the stages, of course, would be based off of Game Boy Advance games. maybe one map. Take a stage from Advance Wars. That was one of the very early titles. Now, I need to count the number of characters here. There'll be one. Okay, we got the original 12. A total of 28 from the initial roster. But I think if I were just looking at this again, I was going to exclude 3 of them. That would be 25. But for a Game Boy Advance title, that would be pretty phenomenal and very a bunch to try and fit in. Not even characters like in Mario Kart Advance had a pretty small roster. So if they were to include that many characters on a Game Boy Advance cartridge, that would be impressive. But maybe with the diminished uses of how many stages. I think most of the cast would be cut in half if they didn't have to exclude Actually, if they excluded some of the original 12, then it would be still pretty low roster, 13, 14. But as it is, I think if they ever did do that, that'd be a pretty impressive thing at the time. But yeah, this was just a small project that I thought about, just do as an art project, get some sprites, put it all together, and just say, hey, this was just a fun dream idea I had to do, and that was it. But yeah, but this is what I wanted to talk about, just get my thoughts out since Smash Ultimate was a thing right now. I don't know if I'll do more of these late night ramblings. It's because these will be mostly just on the fly. But yeah, if you enjoyed these, please leave a comment in the comment section down below. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos. And until then, this has been your Me of the East. And until next time, take care, everyone.